Hey guys, tonight we're putting on our most stylish pointy hats and taking a midnight stroll through the deeply weird, slightly moldy, and extremely paranoid world of the Salem witch trials. Forget the spooky Halloween specials, forget the double toil and trouble cackling, and absolutely forget anything involving sexy witches on brooms. We're talking about the real 1692, when all it took to ruin your day was a neighbor's weird dream. A loaf of bread that looked at you funny, or maybe just a Tuesday. So before you get comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Seriously, no pressure. If you've ever accidentally hexed your Wi-Fi or been the victim of a mysterious workplace curse called meetings, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what era you're stuck in. Now, dim those lights. Maybe switch on a fan for that classic haunted Massachusetts attic white noise and let yourself melt into something soft. Tuck your feet in so the Puritan gremlins can't nibble your toes. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what actually went down in Salem? Why did everyone suddenly wake up and choose chaos? Could you get accused of witchcraft just for forgetting your neighbor's birthday? Was there a secret password to avoid getting dunked in the river? What did the town actually smell like? Did people have hobbies? Or was it just stress and soup 24/7? And honestly, if you time traveled there, how many minutes would it take before you accidentally got put on trial for excessive sarcasm? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in Salem Village. The year is 1692. You're wearing the same woolen underwear for the 12th straight day. Your breakfast is cold cornmeal, and everyone in town is staring at you like you might be the devil's barista. Good luck. Salem Village isn't the sleepy New England hamlet you see on Paris postcards. It's more like a pressure cooker with bad insulation, a strict curfew, and an endless supply of deeply suspicious neighbors. The fields are muddy, the sermons are long, and the vibe is somewhere between family reunion and jury duty. Every glance is a potential accusation, and the only thing thicker than the Puritan accents is the tension. Let's set the scene. The year is 1692. You've just woken up in a one-room timber house that smells like damp socks and yesterday's anxiety. The only privacy you get is when the outhouse is occupied. You peek out your tiny window, if you're lucky enough to have one, and see your neighbor trudging through the mud. He's not waving. He's never waving. In Salem, waving is suspicious. You might as well shout, "I'm up to something." It's not that people here want to hate each other. It's that there's only so much daylight, and even less good news. Most days, your entertainment is watching your neighbor's fence collapse again, or speculating on why Widow Parker's cow is giving less milk. Is it a sick cow, or is someone cursing her butter? Nobody really knows, but everyone has a theory, and none of them are minding your own business. You can feel the tension in the air, like the static before a thunderstorm, or the feeling you get in a staff meeting when someone mentions restructuring. There are rules, spoken and unspoken, for everything. How loud you can pray, how low you can bow, how long you can look at someone's turnip patch before they decide you're after their land or their soul. If your family has a feud with another family, congratulations. You're probably already halfway to an accusation, and you didn't even get a fun origin story. The churches are packed, the sermons are long, and the message is always the same. Be afraid. Be afraid of Satan, of temptation, of your neighbor, of anything that doesn't smell like boiled cabbage. It's not exactly the feel-good Sunday you might remember from your own childhood. The ministers thunder on about the fires of hell until you're pretty sure you can smell something burning, but it's just your neighbor's chimney. And you make a mental note that he's burning wood on a Tuesday, which is almost certainly heresy. By nightfall, the darkness isn't just outside. It creeps into your bones. settles in the corners of your house, and keeps your whole family huddled together. Candles are precious, so you're mostly just sitting in the gloom, listening to the wind and the sound of your neighbor's goat doing something deeply untrustworthy. You think about saying something, but then remember, every time someone says something in Salem, things get worse. Gossip is the currency of the village. Every cough, every limp, every time someone sneezes and it sounds a little too demonic, news travels faster than logic. If you're new in town, you're already on the suspect list. If you're old in town, you're probably on the grudge list. Either way, you're walking a fine line between being a little odd and probably a witch. And let's not forget, food is bland, the weather is terrible, and there are more insects than comforting thoughts. If your bread doesn't rise or your child gets sick, you have two options: blame yourself or blame the woman next door whose smile is, frankly, a little unsettling. Most choose option 2. In Salem Village, trust is a luxury. Hope is in short supply. And the only thing everyone agrees on is that someone, maybe everyone, is up to no good. It's not paranoia if they really are out to get you. Right? Time for you to keep your head down, your prayers long, and your opinions shorter. Because in a town built on paranoia, the safest place is invisible. At least, until someone needs a scapegoat. Welcome to Salem Village, where privacy is a myth, and every soul is a subscriber to the local rumor mill. There are no locked doors here, no fenced-in secrets, just a network of nosy neighbors who consider it a public service to know and retell everything about everyone. Your business is their business, and their business is, naturally, also their business. If you want to keep a secret, the best place is probably buried in the woods. Even then, give it 3 days, and someone's goat will probably dig it up. In Salem, social life happens on the edges of fields, at church, or, most dangerously, at the well. Drawing water is a competitive Olympic sport of side-eye and gentle interrogation. How's your mother's rash? Actually means, tell me everything about your family's mysterious illness. And by the way, we all think it's contagious and possibly supernatural. Even a casual good morning can spiral into a day-long debate about whether your boots are too new. And if so, who exactly gave you the money to buy them? You have the town crier, sure. But why bother with official news when the village has Ethel Witherspoon, who can deliver your most embarrassing moment to everyone before lunch? She's got a memory like an elephant and a voice like a foghorn. She remembers when your cousin tripped over his own shoes in 1679 and will remind the congregation of it every single time there's a lull in conversation. Her special skill? Turning "I saw Martha in the cornfield" into "I'm pretty sure Martha's cornfield is haunted." And she's talking to spirits at night. Gossip isn't just entertainment here. It's survival. When you're crammed together in tiny houses, battling the elements, and rationing bread, you need something to talk about that isn't just misery and mildew. The latest scandal about who borrowed whose plough and didn't return it for 3 weeks is spicy enough to get you through a long winter night. The rules are simple. If you hear something, repeat it. If you don't hear something, make it up. And if someone asks where you heard it, say everyone knows. But gossip is a double-edged broomstick. Today's juicy tidbit about your neighbor's odd sleeping habits can be tomorrow's evidence at a witch trial. In a village where different is basically a crime, even the smallest rumor can snowball into catastrophe. Did you see someone talking to themselves? They must be conversing with the devil. Did they pick herbs after sunset? Potions, obviously. And if you sneeze twice in church, well, that's practically an audition for most likely to cause a blight. Social standing is as fragile as a Puritan's smile. One wrong word, one weird look, and you're out. Suddenly your neighbours forget your name. Your bread mysteriously doesn't sell at market. And even the stray cats won't look you in the eye. The only way back into the fold? Confess to something, promise never to do it again, and hope that next week someone else makes a bigger mistake. There's no escape from the gossip vortex. Even the minister isn't safe. His sermons get dissected, his shoes get discussed, and his wife's pie recipe is considered a suspicious act of foreign influence. If the reverend can't avoid the rumour mill, what hope do you have? Your only defence is to keep your head down, your story straight, and your windows shut, though. Let's be honest. Everyone already knows what your windows look like. So, in Salem, mind your manners, watch your words, and always say hello at the well. You never know who's listening, or what story you'll star in next. In the original Gossip Network, you're always connected, whether you like it or not. It's 1692 in Salem, and the list of things you're supposed to be afraid of is longer than your average church service. You're not just worried about wolves or a bad harvest, you're worried about something much spookier, witches. But why? How did a sleepy farming village get so fired up about the possibility that the devil might be hiding behind every barrel of salted cod? First, let's talk about fear. Salem is powered by it the way your car is powered by gasoline and existential dread. The Puritans, who basically invented the fun police, have brought over a hearty blend of old-world superstition, Protestant paranoia, and a belief that Satan is constantly trying to crash the party. Their sermons are less about hope and more about the devil's job openings. Every week, you're told the world is ending. Sin is everywhere. And even the way you churn butter could invite evil spirits into your pantry. If you're thinking, surely not everyone took this seriously, you'd be wrong. In 1692, science is still in its awkward phase, more leeches than logic. So, if your bread molds, it's not bad luck or a damp kitchen, it's the work of witches. If your best cow starts limping, the only explanation is somebody put a hex on Bessie. Because it's definitely not that fence with the giant hole in it. People truly believe in invisible powers, mostly because they can see the effects of these powers in every little disaster. No one trusts random chance, because random chance doesn't come with a neat biblical explanation. And then there's boredom. Salem winters are long, dark, and less entertaining than watching bread rise, which ironically is also suspicious if it rises too fast. The human brain craves excitement, so it starts to see patterns where there are none. Is that just wind rattling the shutters? Or is it Goody Proctor summoning a storm? When you have no books, no sports, and no idea what Netflix is, every odd sound or strange dream gets upgraded to supernatural significance. Don't underestimate the power of jealousy, either. Salem is a competitive place. Land is limited. Status is everything. If your neighbour's crops are thriving and yours look like the devil's salad, you're not going to say maybe they know how to farm. You're going to start wondering what sort of dark deals they've struck after dark. Suspicion is just human nature turned up to 11 by cold weather and even colder hearts. But it's not just local gossip. Witch stories are everywhere. From the British Isles to the colonies, trials and executions have been happening in Europe for generations, and the tales make their way to the New World, growing stranger with every retelling. Children grow up hearing about witches who fly, shapeshift, or turn milk sour just by glaring at it. By the time you're old enough to worry about taxes, you're also fully convinced that anyone can be a witch, including, unfortunately, yourself, if you ever have a weird dream or sneeze at the wrong time. And finally, let's not ignore the role of authority. Ministers and magistrates feed the obsession because it gives them a reason to be extra important. Every time someone suggests the devil might be lurking, the entire town perks up and listens, nervous, eager, a little excited to have something interesting to talk about at last. Being obsessed with witches gives Salem a purpose, a unifying hobby that's way more exciting than tending turnips. So, why was everyone so obsessed with witches? Because fear is contagious, boredom is dangerous, and the devil always makes for a more interesting neighbor than the guy who just wants to borrow your shovel. In Salem, witch fever isn't just an epidemic, it's practically a municipal pastime. Congratulations, you're a regular citizen of Salem Village, 1692. Your job title? Professional Puritan. Your hobbies? Worrying, apologizing, and scrubbing things that will never be clean. You've never heard of self-care, but you've heard a lot about original sin. If you think modern life is repetitive, try living in a world where every day is a rerun, and the only show is survive, but with more shame. Your day starts early, before dawn, because that's when the rooster crows and the preacher starts muttering ominously outside. You wake up on a straw mattress that smells like cold porridge and faint disappointment, wearing a nightshirt that's seen more winters than the family dog. There's no privacy, not in bed, not at the outhouse, not even in your own mind, because you're supposed to confess your thoughts to God at least twice before breakfast, 3 times if you dreamed about dancing, which is definitely not allowed. First order of business. Chores. If you're a woman, you're already behind. There's laundry to do, but don't imagine a cheery washroom or lemon-scented detergent. Picture a splintery tub, freezing water, and soap that's really just lie and hope. The process is less refreshing spa day, and more slowly lose the feeling in your hands, while a goose honks at you for standing in its favorite mud puddle. Forget about stains coming out. Everything ends up the color of historic sadness anyway. Breakfast is a culinary adventure. If your definition of adventure is what's the greyest thing we can put in a bowl, it's usually cold cornmeal, thick pottage, or yesterday's bread, and you eat it in silence, staring at the wall, which is somehow both drafty and damp. There's no coffee, no tea, and definitely no mimosas. If you want something to drink, it's weak beer or water that tastes faintly like disappointment and possibly feet. After breakfast, you go outside to work the fields, or, if you're lucky, mend something broken indoors. It's back-breaking labor, and even the air feels judgmental. The cows seem to moo in disapproval. The wind sighs, "Repent." If you're a man, you plow the fields with a wooden tool that looks like it lost a fight with a tree. If you're a child, congratulations, you're expected to help with everything. Even if you're 5 and your greatest skill is falling in mud. But let's talk about the real business of the day. Guilt. Puritans are Olympic-level guilt trippers. Did you work hard enough? Were your thoughts pure? Did you laugh a little too loud at lunch? Better confess. The preacher is always lurking, ready to remind you that joy is a gateway sin, and even smiling too much could get you a side eye. There's always something to worry about, and if you run out, just ask your neighbor. They'll lend you a few anxieties for free. In the rare moments of downtime, you don't relax. You make lists of chores, pray some more, and maybe repair something. Recreation means Bible study, or, if you're feeling wild, a somber walk while you think about your failings. There's no dancing, no card games, and definitely no singing unless it's a hymn, and you sing it like you're apologizing to God for the noise. At night, you eat soup again, usually the same soup. Because who has time for variety when you're fighting evil? You collapse into bed with a belly full of turnips and unresolved anxiety, hoping for a dream that isn't heresy. In short, Daily life is cold, uncomfortable, and packed with more self-doubt than a modern performance review. But hey, at least you're not in stocks. Yet. Let's talk about the real villain of Salem, the New England winter. It's less courier and Ives holiday card and more low-budget survival documentary. Outside, the wind howls like it's personally offended by your choice of socks. The trees groan under icy weight. Everything is frozen solid, including your ambition, your hope, and at least two of your toes. If you ever fantasized about cozying up in a rustic cabin, welcome to reality. It smells like damp wool and quiet desperation. From November through April, the cold isn't just a season, it's a personality. It creeps through every crack in your plank walls, settles in your bones, and turns your morning wash basin into a miniature skating rink. Your only real defense is to pile on more scratchy layers, huddle close to the fire, and hope nobody needs to open the door until May. But of course, someone always needs to open the door, and the moment they do, you're hit with a blast of air so sharp it makes your teeth itch. The days are short, the nights are endless, and everyone's patience is stretched thinner than last summer's onion soup. Food stores start running low by February. If you're lucky, you have pickled turnips and a hunk of bread that could double as a weapon. If you're not, it's just memories of last year's harvest and the faint hope that you won't have to eat the family goat. Every meal is a group activity. Sniff, poke, chew. Hope it isn't haunted. And let's not forget what winter does to your health. The only thing more common than frostbite is the Salem sniffle, a persistent cold that turns into a chest cough and then into a community-wide chorus of doom. There's no vitamin C, no antibiotics, and the best advice is to bundle up and pray harder. Half the town is shivering, the other half is sneezing, and everyone's convinced it's either the Lord testing them or, more likely, someone practicing dark magic with last year's potato crop. Stuck indoors, nerves start to fray. Cabin fever hits hard. There are only so many times you can recite psalms, mend socks, or pretend to be interested in your cousin's collection of unusual sticks. Children are restless, adults are cranky, and even the family dog seems to be plotting an escape. The air is thick with suspicion and wood smoke. Any noise in the night, branch against a window, mouse in the rafters, becomes instant cause for alarm. Is it a witch? Is it the wind? Should we all get up and pray about it? Yes, always yes. Of course, winter is also when the real drama begins. Boredom is the yeast in Salem's dough of paranoia. The longer people are trapped together, the more creative their imaginations become. Someone's bread goes moldy. Must be a curse. Did the neighbor's cow give less milk? Clearly the work of the devil. Is your uncle acting weird? That's just January. But maybe, just maybe, it's something more sinister. Outside, the snow piles higher. Inside, the accusations start to pile up too. If you wanted to start a witch hunt, you couldn't pick a better climate. Half the town is ready to blame their own shadow for last week's headache. So here you are, shivering in the dark, eating cold soup, and listening to Aunt Mildred snore like a dying ox. You survived another day, but as the cold deepens, so does the village's paranoia. And winter? It's just getting started. You might think the greatest threat to a Puritan village would be famine, wolves, or accidental axe wounds. But in Salem, boredom is the true agent of chaos, the slow, invisible poison that seeps into the cracks of daily life and curdles the mind. Forget the devil. The real dark magic is having absolutely nothing to do and a lot of time to do it. It's winter, so you're trapped indoors with your family, your neighbors, and everyone's collective anxieties. The roads are frozen, the chores are finished, and it's 3 months until the nearest acceptable social event. Someone's pig giving birth. There's no radio, no books unless you count the Bible, and no games unless you're a huge fan of competitive haystacking or silent, anxious staring. Cards? Sinful? Dancing? Scandalous? Jokes? Not unless you want a private chat with the Reverend about your immortal soul. So what's left? The only entertainment available is the slow parade of everyday misery. You watch bread rise. You try to guess what's in tonight's soup. If you're really desperate, you try to interpret the creaks of the house, like it's some kind of Puritan ASMR. Most evenings, your family just sits in the candlelight and lists everything that could go wrong if you're not careful. What if the sheep have nightmares? What if Satan is hiding in the chimney? You're so starved for novelty that even your uncle's stories about the time he saw a beaver become legendary. Spoiler: it was a log. It's not just that there's nothing to do, it's that having nothing to do is dangerous. The mind, desperate for stimulation, starts to fill in the gaps. Someone laughs at the wrong time. Suspicious. Someone's shadow seems a little long tonight. They must be meddling with the supernatural. The young girls of Salem, stuck indoors and hyped up on a mix of sugar, folklore, and family drama, start experimenting with fortune-telling games. It's all fun and games until someone has a weird dream. And then suddenly, the whole village is on red alert. Adults aren't immune either. If you're over 30, your main hobby is worrying about the youth. Why are they so loud? Why are they so quiet? Should we check under the floorboards? Everyone is desperate for something, anything, to distract from the slow crawl of winter. Unfortunately, that something often becomes paranoia. That's the problem with boredom. It's a blank canvas for suspicion. Every strange noise, every flicker of the candle, every minor mishap becomes a potential sign from the devil. Maybe it's witchcraft. Maybe it's just the wind. But isn't it more interesting, more fun, in a dark Puritan way, to assume the worst? By now, your community is on edge. A cracked egg is no longer just a breakfast mishap, but a possible sign of a curse. Someone's hair turns grey overnight. Clearly they've seen something they shouldn't have. There's no way to prove innocence or guilt, but there's also nothing better to do. So why not start an impromptu investigation? The alternative is another night of silent shivering. In Salem, boredom is the kindling that keeps the fire of fear alive. It's not the devil that makes people do wild things. It's the desperate need for something, anything, to break up the monotony of life in a tiny, isolated, perpetually chilly village. So next time you complain about being bored, just remember, in 1692, all it took was a long winter and a lack of Netflix to start the most infamous witch hunt in American history. Maybe scroll your phone, have a snack, and be grateful that your neighbors aren't about to accuse you of sorcery just because you yawned a little too dramatically. Picture it. A small, smoky parsonage at the center of Salem village, lit by guttering candles and the pure, unfiltered energy of young girls desperate for literally anything to happen. You're stuck inside for months, your chores are finished, and there's nothing left to do but invent your own fun. Enter the circle, Salem's original girl gang. No TikTok, no truth or dare. Just a handful of restless, giggly preteens with too much time and access to old wives' tales. It all starts harmlessly enough. Maybe you and your friends gather around the kitchen table while the adults argue about fence lines and damnation in the next room. You play fortune-telling games learned from a Caribbean servant, dropping egg whites in glasses to see your future husband's face, or melting lead in a spoon to read your fate in its shape. It's forbidden fun, a little scary, a lot thrilling, and a welcome break from reciting psalms. And because you live in a town where fun is always suspicious, you keep it a secret. Secrets, unfortunately, are the fastest growing crop in Salem. If you've ever whispered with friends in the back row of a classroom, you know the feeling. There's an electric charge, danger, rebellion, and, more importantly, the feeling that you're not quite as powerless as the grown-ups think. But then things get weird. Someone starts shaking during prayers. Another girl bursts into sobs, claiming she's being pinched by invisible hands. It's equal parts performance and panic, nerves, hormones, stress, maybe even some undiagnosed ergot poisoning from bad bread. But the adults don't see anxious teenagers. They see the fingerprints of the devil. The rumor spreads faster than head lice at a barn dance. Reverend Samuel Parris, whose household is ground zero for all this drama, panics. His daughter Betty and niece Abigail are right in the thick of it, and soon other girls join in. Ann Putnam, Mercy Lewis, Mary Walcott, and more. It becomes the hottest ticket in town, a spectacle of writhing, wailing, barking, and accusing, with the entire community as a captive audience. Adults gather to witness the fits, and suddenly, you and your friends are at the center of the universe. You're listened to, coddled, and, most dangerously, believed. You start to realize just how much power you have. The adults hang on your every word, terrified that the devil is literally inside the parsonage. What started as a little mischief turns into the world's worst group project. The invention of mass hysteria. Peer pressure amplifies everything. If your friend shrieks, you shriek louder. If someone names a witch, you chime in. Nobody wants to be left out, and nobody wants to look like they're not suffering enough. The line between pretend and real blurs. Are you faking it? Or are you genuinely terrified? Maybe both. Maybe neither. In a place where reality bends to the strength of rumor and fear, it honestly doesn't matter. Meanwhile, every adult in town is scanning their mental Rolodex of enemies. Who's been odd lately? Who's given you a dirty look? The list of suspects grows, and so does the intensity of the performances. A little act of rebellion snowballs into a civic emergency. By the end of the week, your secret circle has become the moral panic at the center of the world. Your fun and games, born of boredom, restlessness, and a taste for the forbidden, are about to launch a series of accusations that will sweep through Salem like a blizzard. So next time you complain about being bored at a sleepover, remember, in 1692, all it took was one parsonage, some bored girls, and a pinch of mischief to change the course of American history. It begins quietly enough. A sudden shriek in the middle of a sermon. A child thrashing on the floor like she's caught between a nightmare and a bee sting. Then another girl follows, then another. By the end of the week, Salem Village is basically hosting the world's most alarming slumber party. Forget demons in horror movies. Here, the main attractions are convulsions, wild contortions, and dramatic displays of barking, howling, and occasionally climbing furniture like a very confused raccoon. You can't blame people for freaking out. If your own daughter started babbling nonsense, crawling under the pews, and insisting invisible creatures were biting her ankles, you'd probably worry too. In 1692, there are exactly 0 trained child psychologists, and the closest thing to a diagnosis is asking the minister to pray louder. The afflicted girls scream, flail, speak in tongues, and claim to see spirits lurking in the shadows, sometimes naming names, sometimes just pointing at the wall with wide, terror-struck eyes. It's like a cross between amateur theatre and a medical emergency. The village reacts the only way it knows how. With panic, adults hover, wring their hands, and try everything from scolding to soothing. They press cold cloths to fevered brows, sprinkle holy water, and debate whether this is God's test or the devil's sneak attack. When nothing works, everyone starts looking for someone or something to blame. Doctors, of course, are no help at all. Doctor, William Griggs, the nearest thing to a medical expert, takes a brief look at the scene and delivers the 17th century equivalent of, "Have you tried turning her off and back on again?" He rules out natural causes almost immediately. Because obviously, it couldn't be stress, trauma, or bad rye bread. It must be witchcraft. The cure, prayer, fasting, and public humiliation. Side effects may include increased mass hysteria and the occasional neighbor being burned at the stake. As word spreads, people flock to the afflicted girls' homes to gawk, gasp, and offer unwanted advice. The girls become local celebrities, famous for being mysterious, tormented, and, more importantly, listened to. The performances escalate. Some fall into trances, eyes rolled back, limbs jerking in time to invisible rhythms. Others claim to be struck mute, only able to communicate through shrieks and frantic gestures. At night, the fits intensify. By candlelight, every shadow looks like a demon. Every creak sounds like the devil's footsteps. Adults scramble for answers. Is this a sickness? A curse? A sign of the end times? There's no shortage of theories, and every parent secretly wonders if their own child might be next. The fits spread through the village, and with each new victim the panic grows. What was once an isolated problem has now become an epidemic. You try to stay out of it, but the anxiety is catching. You wake up every morning and check to see who's started twitching overnight. People avoid eye contact, avoid the afflicted, and sometimes avoid church altogether. Because who knows what kind of spiritual virus is going around? But the more everyone avoids the problem, the worse it seems to get. The whole village is held hostage by the fear that the next victim might be them. What started as a handful of mysterious fits has become the engine driving the Salem panic. The girls writhing, shrieking, and crawling become evidence of something evil in the village. A performance so convincing that even the grown-ups start to believe their worst nightmares might be coming true. So, if you hear someone barking under the pews, best just keep your head down and pray you're not next on the list. If you think modern healthcare is confusing, spare a thought for 1692, where Dr. William Griggs is your best and only hope. Griggs is not a doctor in the modern sense. He's more local man with a book and a strong opinion. There's no license, no medical school, and not even a suspiciously expensive white coat. His main tools are herbal teas, guesswork, and a sturdy set of nerves. You don't go to Dr. Griggs for a second opinion. You go because there's nobody else in town with access to both leeches and the Bible. When the mysterious fits hit Salem's girls, Dr. Griggs gets the call. He arrives, peers over his spectacles, if he's wearing them, sometimes he forgets, and takes a long, dramatic pause. The girls are twitching, moaning, convulsing, and he has no idea why. Maybe it's nerves. Maybe it's something in the water. Maybe they're just tired of boiled cabbage. But admitting uncertainty isn't good for business. So Dr. Griggs shrugs, clears his throat, and pronounces his diagnosis. The evil hand is upon them. In other words, witchcraft. Suddenly, everyone's symptoms make sense. If you squint. Bad dreams? Witchcraft. Aching joints? Witchcraft. Sudden urge to tap dance on a Wednesday? Probably witchcraft. Dr. Griggs prescribes the 3 essentials for Puritan healing: prayer, fasting, and a brisk application of public shame. There are no pills to swallow, just guilt and sermons. If you're hoping for a soothing cup of something, it's probably wormwood and regret. The problem is, this diagnosis is contagious. Within days, more villagers report odd symptoms: headaches, chills, stomach aches, the general malaise of surviving a New England winter. Dr. Griggs, now feeling the glow of job security, confirms each new case as afflicted by witchcraft. It's the world's worst chain reaction. and Salem becomes the only town where you can spread hysteria just by describing your symptoms out loud. Let's talk about bedside manner. Doctor, Griggs doesn't sugarcoat anything. If you cry, he tells you to stop, there are demons about. If you laugh, he calls for the minister. He's not interested in comfort or reassurance. His main advice, repent and don't eat the rye. Spoiler, everyone keeps eating the rye. He checks pulses by touching your forehead and staring thoughtfully into space, possibly calculating the odds that he'll get home in time for supper. Of course, he can't cure the afflicted. He just declares them to be suffering from something supernatural, then moves on to the next patient. If you're really unlucky, he suggests a purging, hot water, mustard seeds, and a prayer circle. Side effects may include vomiting, fainting, and an increased risk of being accused of witchcraft yourself. His record-keeping is legendary for its lack of detail. Patient, wiggly, diagnosis, probably bewitched. If your fits stop, it's a miracle. If they continue, it's proof of the devil. Heads he wins, tails you lose. Under Doctor Griggs's expert non-guidance, the town slips fully into medical madness. People stop trusting their bodies, their neighbors, and eventually their own sanity. Why go to a healer who can't heal? Because, in Salem, having someone say, "It's witchcraft," is oddly reassuring. At least now you know what you're suffering from, even if you have no hope of a cure. So you lie in bed, sipping whatever foul concoction Griggs has prescribed, praying for relief. And if things get worse, well, it's nothing a good exorcism and a public confession can't fix. Every story needs a scapegoat, and in Salem, all suspicious eyes turn to Tituba. She's the outsider in a town where outsider means probably to blame. Born in Barbados, Tituba is an enslaved woman in the household of Reverend Samuel Parris, and she already stands out in a sea of pale, anxious faces. Her accent, her knowledge of folk remedies, and her skin color are all strikes against her. If you're playing Salem Bingo, accuse the person who doesn't fit in is always a winning square. When the village's girls begin their mysterious fits, Tituba is caught in the storm. Maybe she told the girls stories from her homeland, tales of spirits, omens, or protective charms. Maybe she tried to help by brewing herbal teas or muttered prayers in the kitchen. To the Puritan mind, anything unfamiliar is immediately filed under witchy business. Within days, Tituba goes from household servant to number one suspect. It doesn't help that the adults are desperate for a solution. Any solution. The ministers press the afflicted girls. Who hurt you? Who visited you in the night? And with the subtlety of a sledgehammer, they suggest a few names. Tituba's is always first on the list. The girls, anxious to please, terrified of not being believed, or maybe just caught up in the drama, point to Tituba. She's foreign. She's different. She must be the reason for all this trouble. She's arrested and hauled before the magistrates. Imagine the scene. Cold, crowded room. Men with serious hats and even more serious expressions. Tituba stands alone. They demand she confess. At first, she denies everything. But the questioning is relentless. Hours of accusations, threats, and the looming fear of punishment. In Salem, innocent until proven guilty is just a rumor. And the best way to survive is to give the people what they want. So Tituba confesses, but not in the way anyone expects. She spins a tale more fantastic than any Puritan nightmare. She admits she's seen witches, talked to animals, even flown on a stick. Not a broom. Budget cuts, perhaps. She says the devil came to her and asked her to sign his book. She describes strange beasts and dark meetings in the woods. Each detail is juicier than the last. and the magistrates eat it up. They push for more, and Tituba delivers, naming other witches in the village. In that moment, she accidentally supercharges the entire witch hunt. The room goes silent, then explodes with panic. Tituba's confession has two effects. It confirms everyone's worst fears, and it gives the afflicted girls a blueprint for future stories. Suddenly, accusations multiply. If Tituba could bewitch the village, so could anyone. No one is safe. Her confession isn't just a way to survive. It's a spark thrown onto a powder keg. Back in her cell, Tituba waits for a fate she can't control. She's both central to the story and utterly powerless. A woman whose only real crime was being different, unlucky, and in the wrong place at the wrong time. Outside, Salem's hysteria shifts into overdrive. People look at their neighbors, their friends, even their own families with new suspicion. The circle of blame expands, and Tituba's story is retold, warped, and weaponized at every turn. So if you're ever in a strange place, surrounded by people desperate for someone to blame, remember Tituba. Sometimes the worst thing you can be is the only one who doesn't fit in. Once Tituba confesses, the air in Salem shifts from tense to electric. Word spreads through the village like cold through a poorly insulated window. Anyone could be a witch. And more importantly, the surest way to escape suspicion is to point the finger at someone else. The accusation Olympics have begun, and the only event is survival. Picture yourself in this suddenly turbocharged atmosphere. Maybe you're just a regular villager, minding your business and trying not to catch the mysterious fits. Suddenly, someone looks at you a little too long during Sunday service. Maybe you borrowed a pan and forgot to return it. Maybe you gave a weird answer when asked about your dreams last night. It doesn't take much. If there's even a whiff of suspicion, you're next on the list. But wait. There's hope. If you accuse someone else, you might buy yourself a little safety. After all, the afflicted girls claim to see invisible spirits, and the town leaders are taking notes. When you're hauled before the magistrates, confessing is risky, but accusing someone else? That's downright strategic. Name a name, and you're suddenly less interesting as a target. The witch hunt turns into a kind of grim game show. Congratulations, you've just won immunity by ruining your neighbor's life. It starts with the obvious choices, people who already don't fit in, the grumpy old woman with the sharp tongue, the midwife who knows too much about herbs, the neighbor whose fence is always just a little too perfect. Then it gets weirder, accusations against children, churchgoers, and, in a surreal twist, even a few of the accusers themselves. The web expands. Everyone knows that if you don't accuse, you're probably hiding something. The trials become a parade of finger-pointing, denials, and confessions squeezed out under threat of hanging or worse. You're asked impossible questions. Have you ever seen a black cat? Did you ever mutter a prayer in the wrong language? Did your bread rise too quickly? Every answer is a trap. Say no, and they're convinced you're lying. Say yes, and you're halfway to the gallows. Social dynamics get scrambled. Old feuds resurface. That dispute over a property line last year? Now it's evidence that your neighbor cursed your crops. The time you refused to lend a cup of sugar? Proof you're consorting with dark forces. Families turn on each other. Best friends become bitter rivals. And the town's sense of community dissolves faster than salt in rainwater. Even children are drawn into the spiral. If you're a kid, and the grown-ups are looking for someone to blame, your best bet is to point to another kid, or even your own parents. It's not malice, just desperation. When the entire village is hungry for scapegoats, no one is truly safe. And the authorities? They encourage it. The more accusations, the more evidence they have that the devil's work is afoot. Judges, ministers, and magistrates fan the flames. Convinced they're purifying the village, even as the list of suspects balloons from a handful to dozens. Eventually, it's hard to remember who started it all or what you're even afraid of anymore. Suspicion is contagious, and the only cure is to redirect it onto someone else. So you keep your head down and your stories straight. You rehearse your alibis, invent new enemies, and hope the panic will pass before your name is whispered at the well. In Salem, the best way to stay safe is to make sure someone else looks guiltier than you, even if all you ever wanted was to bake bread in peace. If you think modern courtrooms are stressful, try surviving a Salem trial, where reality is optional and spectral evidence is the hot new legal trend. In 1692, you don't need fingerprints, a motive, or even a particularly convincing alibi. All you need is for someone, preferably a teenager mid-fit, to say they saw your ghostly double doing something shady in their dreams. Welcome to the only legal system where napping can land you on death row. Spectral evidence is exactly what it sounds like. Accusations based on visions, dreams, or the ghostly shenanigans of specters, aka spiritual clones. If Abigail claims your spirit pinched her in the night, that's good enough for the magistrates. Never mind that you were physically at home, snoring beside your snoring spouse. The real you might have been in bed, but your invisible self apparently had a very busy night of tormenting the youth of Salem. The rules are, let's say, flexible. Any dream, nightmare, or intrusive thought can be presented as proof. No need for hard evidence or witnesses, just a vivid imagination and the willingness to put on a convincing show in front of grown men with wigs and very little patience. The afflicted girls outdo themselves with dramatic gasps, spontaneous fits, and claims of flying shadows. Sometimes they'll shriek and point at an empty corner, claiming to see the accused spectre climbing the beams, grinning with demonic teeth. The crowd leans in. The magistrates nod gravely. You consider moving to Rhode Island. If you're accused, defending yourself is nearly impossible. How do you prove you didn't appear in someone else's dream? Try saying, "I promise I was asleep," or "My spectre doesn't even like leaving the house." It won't work. The harder you protest, the guiltier you look. Denying a supernatural accusation is just more proof you've mastered the dark arts. In Salem logic, circular reasoning is the only shape that matters. And it's not just the adults who play along. Kids, swept up in hysteria and enjoying their new roles as local celebrities, report visions of spectres pinching, biting, and otherwise tormenting them. Some adults, eager for attention, power, or revenge, start seeing things too. Soon, everyone's dreams are full of flying cats, demonic grandmothers, and neighbors turning into black dogs at midnight. The line between waking life and feverish fantasy blurs, until nobody remembers what's real. The judges love it. Spectral evidence keeps the trials lively, the crowds on edge, and the case files thick. It's a prosecutor's dream. Impossible to disprove. Always dramatic. And guaranteed to get everyone talking. If you're looking for actual proof, an enchanted toad, a broomstick, or even a pointy hat, you're out of luck. All you'll get is more accusations and increasingly wild ghost stories. For the townsfolk, it's terrifying. Every nightmare becomes a possible indictment. You lie awake at night, afraid to dream of anything but sheep. Even then, you worry someone will accuse you of bewitching the livestock. You stop making eye contact, keep your hands to yourself, and try not to fall asleep in church. By the time the court sessions end, spectral evidence has torn the community apart, leaving everyone suspect and nobody safe. It's a masterclass in the dangers of letting dreams, grudges, and gossip decide who gets to live another day. So, if you're feeling sleepy in 1692 Salem, maybe stay awake. In this town, even your nap schedule could get you arrested. Welcome to the big leagues. The court of Oya and Termina, where justice is swift, logic is wobbly, and the only thing more unpredictable than the weather is the verdict. Oya and Termina, fancy French for to hear and determine, sounds impressive, but don't be fooled. This is less a trial and more a chaotic improv show with higher stakes than your average dinner party. Picture the scene. A packed meeting house full of anxious townsfolk, the afflicted girls putting on their best, fainting and screaming, and a panel of solemn men in wigs who are, frankly, making it up as they go along. You stand at the front, nervous and itchy under your best, only woolen clothes. The air smells like sweat, nervousness, and old soup. Everyone in the room is hoping today's spectacle doesn't end with them on the stand. The judges, men like William Stoughton, pride themselves on being serious, upright, and absolutely certain they're fighting evil in the name of God and colony. But their toolkit for determining guilt is a lot like a grab bag. A little law, a little hearsay. A lot of my cousins said she saw your spectre, and the occasional he just seems like the witchy type. There are no lawyers for the accused, no right to cross-examine witnesses, and no appeals except for, "Can I please go home?" Spectral evidence, gossip, and grudges take center stage. The afflicted girls, already practiced in their roles, shriek, twitch, and clutch their throats the moment you enter. Someone points at you. "She's pinching me right now." The judges lean in, eager for any hint of the supernatural. The audience is rapt, torn between horror and entertainment. Think reality TV, but with more risk of execution. If you try to defend yourself, good luck. Logic is not welcome here. I wasn't even in town. My spirit must have an excellent work ethic. Nothing lands. In fact, the more you protest, the more everyone suspects you've bewitched the judges themselves. If you start crying, it's a sign of guilt. If you stay calm, it's proof you're in league with the devil. The court is rigged against you in ways that would make Kafka sigh. It doesn't help that the trials are fast and furious. There are so many accused and so much panic that each case gets the legal equivalent of a speed date. Blink and you might miss your own defense. The witnesses are neighbors, ex-friends, sometimes even your own relatives, eager to show how committed they are to Puritan virtue by helping send you to the gallows. The line between justice and mob rule is thinner than your neighbor's patience. Meanwhile, the judges scribble notes, consult each other, and sometimes call for tests. Maybe you have to recite the Lord's Prayer without making a mistake. Mess up a single thigh, and it's straight to the condemned's bench. They might check for witch marks, strange blemishes that, let's be honest, everyone has if you look closely enough. Medical privacy, never heard of her. At the end of the session, the judges render their verdict. The crowd leans in. Sometimes there's applause. Sometimes there's weeping. Always. There's a sense that the wheel of misfortune is still spinning, and tomorrow it might land on you. So, if you ever long for the good old days of justice, remember Oya and Termina, where the only consistent thing is the urge to survive, and Kangaroo Court doesn't even begin to cover it. In a town where anyone can be accused of witchcraft, the suspect list reads less like a roster of evil masterminds and more like the guest list for a church bake sale. Forget the classic cackling villain. Salem's supposed witches are grandmothers, midwives, the awkward guy from the edge of town, and yes, the person who taught you the Lord's Prayer last week. First up, the grandmothers. If you're old, female, and have the audacity to own a cat or mutter to yourself while weaving, you're a prime target. The logic? Clearly, surviving past 60 in Salem means you've struck a deal with the dark side. Maybe you're outspoken. Maybe you never remarried. Or maybe you just have too many opinions about soup. Either way, congratulations. Your golden years are about to get a lot more eventful. Then there's the midwife. In any other century, midwives are everyday heroes. In Salem, helping deliver babies, handling herbs, and knowing which root treats what ailment means you're suspiciously knowledgeable. Sure, you saved half the village from fevers and complications, but you also know how to make a tea that helps people sleep. In a world without science, that's basically black magic. Never mind your years of experience, or the fact that you've probably delivered half the people testifying against you. Next are the social misfits. Anyone who stands out for the wrong reasons. Maybe you're the neighbor who always repairs his fence at dusk, or you wear colors a shade too bright, or you laugh at jokes no one else finds funny. Maybe you're poor or childless, or you once scolded someone else's kid for tracking mud inside. In Salem, being different is its own kind of crime. Even churchgoers aren't safe. Did you sing off-key? Forget a verse in the hymn? Take communion a little too enthusiastically? Suddenly, your piety is suspect. Your Sunday school teacher, that patient soul who has endured years of restless children, is now sweating through her only nice dress in front of the judges. She once gave you a stern look for passing notes, and now you're expected to believe she's consorting with the devil. Men aren't immune. But the odds are stacked against women, especially those who are vulnerable, outspoken, or inconveniently in possession of property someone else would rather have. If you're a widow, your land is a tempting target for neighbors eager to see you moved off by supernatural means. If you're a mother with a child who died young, some will whisper that you brought tragedy upon yourself. Grief is private, but in Salem, even your tears might be considered evidence. And the accusations never end with the first round. Once suspicion lands on a household, everyone in it, spouses, children, hired hands, gets pulled into the dragnet. No family is safe. Some are accused together, others are turned against each other, and all are left wondering which friend will be the next to testify. Yesterday's neighbor is today's informant. One day, you're sharing soup at the fire. The next, you're both trying to convince a judge that your cough is just a cough. By now, nobody knows who to trust. Everyone's scared, everyone's defensive, and the only thing more dangerous than being accused is not being accused, because that means you must be really good at hiding your wicked ways. So, when you imagine a witch in Salem, forget the broomstick and the wart. Instead, picture your grandmother, your neighbor, your midwife, and the person who taught you how to recite the Psalms. In Salem, anyone can be a suspect. All it takes is a bad reputation, a run of bad luck, or being a little too memorable. There always has to be a first. And in Salem's parade of unfortunate souls, that honor goes to Bridget Bishop. If there's such a thing as asking for trouble in a Puritan village, Bridget has checked all the boxes. She wears bright clothes when everyone else dresses like a sad storm cloud. She runs a tavern. She speaks her mind. She's loud, laughs easily, and, perhaps most offensively, doesn't seem all that interested in apologizing for existing. In Salem, that's as good as painting. Accuse me on your front door. But let's set the scene. June 1692. By now the jails are crowded, tempers are short, and everyone's ready for the judges to do something, anything. Bridget Bishop is brought to trial. A little older than most, a little feistier than some, and definitely not ready to go quietly. Her reputation precedes her. Townsfolk whisper about her 3 marriages, her bad temper, her tendency to serve cider late into the night. Never mind that most of these so-called crimes amount to living life with some personality. The afflicted girls put on a show for the ages. They shriek when Bridget looks their way. They collapse in fits when she fiddles with her apron. One claims to see her ghost in the rafters, another says she's pinched her arm, and a third insists that Bridget's spectre tried to force-feed her cider. The judges eat it up. After all, Bridget is just the kind of witch who's easy to blame. She's bold, unafraid, and inconveniently memorable. Her trial is a masterclass in hearsay and paranoia. Neighbors recall every argument they ever had with her. Someone claims she bewitched their pig. Another says their beer soured after a visit to her tavern. The evidence is less smoking gun and more smoking rumor. Did her third husband really die mysteriously? Or was he just unlucky enough to live in a time when most people didn't see their 50th birthday? No matter. The court is looking for a scapegoat, and Bridget fits the bill. Bridget herself doesn't help her case, at least not by Puritan standards. She protests loudly. She laughs off the most ridiculous charges. She refuses to confess, refuses to break down, and generally refuses to act like a woman about to be condemned. Her spirit and stubbornness, which might have won her admirers in any other era, just make the judges more certain they've found the ringleader of Salem's supernatural uprising. It doesn't take long for the court to reach a verdict. Bridget Bishop, found guilty on the thinnest of evidence, is sentenced to hang. On June 10, 1692, she is led to the gallows on Gallows Hill, the first of what will become a grim procession. The crowd gathers, half relieved, half horrified. Some hope that Bridget's execution will end the madness. Spoiler: it won't. In her final moments, Bridget doesn't curse the town or cast any dramatic spells. She proclaims her innocence, standing tall as the rope is fitted around her neck. There are no last-minute miracles, no sudden confessions, just the cold certainty of a community desperate for someone to blame. Bridget's death is supposed to satisfy the hunger for justice, but instead, it does the opposite. The villagers watch her body swing, and then go home with more questions, more fear, and, inevitably, more names to accuse. So when you hear her story, remember, in Salem, the first to hang was not the most wicked, just the most impossible to ignore. If you thought witch trials were all doom, gloom, and fire and brimstone, think again. Salem in 1692 is also a booming marketplace, proof that even in times of hysteria, humans will find a way to make a buck. The trials draw crowds from across Essex County and beyond. It's part courtroom, part public spectacle, part pop-up festival. Who knew community panic could be so profitable? First, there's the food. No tragedy is complete without snacks, and local vendors are quick to seize the opportunity. The meeting house lawn transforms into a scene straight out of a colonial tailgate. You can buy apples, slightly bruised, but who's checking, roasted nuts, stale bread, and cider, because nothing says justice like washing down gossip with a cup of lukewarm booze. Children beg for treats. Grown-ups try to sneak sips of something stronger, claiming it's for the nerves. And if you want a souvenir, Salem's got you covered. Local craftsmen turn the witch trials into an economic opportunity. Crude wooden charms for protection, poppets, little dolls that definitely won't get you accused if you're caught with one, and even commemorative broadsheets detailing the juiciest confessions. You can purchase a sketch of the gallows for your wall, or a pamphlet about Satan's plot in New England for the home library. If Etsy existed, it would be chaos. Every event needs a hype man, and in Salem, that role goes to the town criers and sermonizers. They don't just announce the day's proceedings, they dramatize them. The latest accusations are bellowed across the village green, complete with extra details for maximum effect. Some ministers double as color commentators, warning everyone that the devil walks among them and suggesting the crowd pray louder, just in case. No one is immune to the thrill of a little performative terror. The trials themselves turn into something of a social occasion. People come to watch neighbors break down, faint, or launch into public fits. The afflicted girls become celebrities. Everyone wants a front row seat to see which one will shriek first, or who'll collapse dramatically when a new suspect enters. The town's gossips circulate, collecting stories for later, already planning which bits to exaggerate for the dinner table. Of course, all this commerce isn't lost on the authorities. Fines are issued left and right for bad behavior, and the money goes straight into local coffers. Jailers charge prisoners' families for the privilege of delivering food or blankets. If you want your loved one to survive their stay in Salem's lockup, you'd better have deep pockets or friends in the snack business. The festival atmosphere is surreal. 1 minute, you're watching a neighbor defend themselves from a spectral accusation. The next, you're bartering over a pie or arguing with someone about which suspect looks the most bewitched. Children chase each other between the legs of anxious adults, imitating fits for laughs. Dogs scavenge for scraps under the benches. Even the livestock seem to sense something unusual in the air. Some come for the spectacle, others for business, a few for justice. Most just come for the distraction. A brief break from the grind of fields and chores. The witch hunt becomes both a cautionary tale and a cash cow. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that wherever there's fear, there's money to be made from it. So as the noose tightens, the cider flows. The snack vendors thrive, the broadsheets sell out, and the show goes on. In Salem, the only thing that grows faster than suspicion is the economy of panic. If you think high school drama is intense, you've never lived in 1692 Salem, where petty grievances are the village's most renewable energy source. Old slights, long simmering feuds, and generational beef suddenly have a new outlet. And that outlet is a full-blown witch hunt. In a town where everyone knows everyone else's business, no slight goes unnoticed, no insult unremembered, and no borrowed cup of sugar ever truly forgiven. It starts subtly. Maybe your neighbor's cow trampled your squash patch 3 years ago. Maybe someone cut in front of you at the well, or once accused your son of stealing apples. Perhaps your fences share a border, and you're both convinced the other moved it 6 inches over during the last frost. In ordinary times, these would be the stuff of passive-aggressive glances and icy church greetings. But now, every inconvenience can be weaponized. The witch trials turn neighbor against neighbor in a way that's almost impressive. The Putnams and the Porters, already feuding over land and influence, start to see the witch panic as an opportunity to settle scores. If someone's name appears on the list of the accused, you can bet there's a backstory. A failed loan, a slight at a barn raising, a quarrel over whose ox is the laziest. Salem's justice is less about good versus evil and more about who ticked me off last winter. People are quick to add fuel to the fire. All it takes is a whispered suggestion. I always thought Goody Nurse looked a little suspicious. And suddenly the town's memory banks open up. Remember that time she gave me a dirty look at the market? That must have been a curse. Someone else pipes in. She once refused to lend me a candle, probably hoarding them for her dark rituals. It's group therapy, Puritan style. Say everything you ever resented, but now with higher stakes. And it's not just adults. Children take sides, echoing their parents' suspicions and inventing new ones. Old playground spats are replayed with a supernatural twist. Did Abigail snatch your best skipping stone? Maybe she's got a demon helping her. Did you get left out of the hopscotch circle? Clearly, the ringleader is possessed. Even pets aren't immune. If your dog barked at the wrong moment, that's just further proof that you and your entire household are up to no good. The courtroom becomes a confessional for the town's collective grievances. People testify to offences that happened years before. She once let her fire go out, and the whole village nearly froze. He didn't shovel the path after the last snow. Clearly the work of the devil. These grudges stack up until the original accusations are lost in a tangled mess of ancient beefs and community politics. Some take full advantage. If you've ever wanted revenge, now's your chance. Land disputes? Solve them by accusing your rival. Argument over who gets the last pew at church? There's always room on the witness stand for a little spectral evidence. It's a perfect storm of fear, boredom, and long-held resentment. But beneath the chaos, something darker brews. Salem's web of grudges, once manageable with a good gossip session, is now loaded with real consequences. Ruined lives, broken families, and public hangings. By the end, nobody remembers who started it, only that everyone is worse off and nobody trusts anyone anymore. So next time you feel like holding on to a petty grudge, maybe let it go. History's most infamous witch hunt was less about black magic and more about the magic of not being able to let things slide. So you've been accused of witchcraft in Salem. Congratulations! You're about to experience the 17th century version of proving your innocence. A process that involves pastries, pain, and, if you're unlucky, a surprise dip in a cold pond. Spoiler: the tests are rigged, and the science is somewhere between bad guess and please stop. First, let's talk about the witch cake. When the afflicted girls can't seem to recover, the village calls in a local cunning woman, the era's closest thing to a Google search. Her solution is to bake a cake using rye meal mixed with a key ingredient: urine from the afflicted. The idea? Feed it to a dog. If the dog acts weird, that's proof someone's casting spells. If the dog just looks confused and walks away, like any sane creature would, the town claims the dog is bewitched too. So, win-win for panic, lose-lose for science and everyone's appetite. Next up, the touch test. This is exactly as invasive and awkward as it sounds. If the afflicted girls fall into fits, the accused must touch them. If the fit stops, that's evidence the accused is the witch. Of course, if the fit doesn't stop, it means you're too powerful, or the devil is helping you hide your guilt. Heads they win, tails you lose. No pressure. Then there's the examination for witch marks. Any wart, mole, freckle, or insect bite could be labelled as a devil's teat, a spot where your infernal familiar feeds. You stand in a freezing room while a panel of stern-faced matrons and self-appointed experts inspect every inch of your skin for blemishes. Privacy is non-existent. Dignity goes out the window, and every natural imperfection is suddenly the world's most damning evidence. Still not convinced you're guilty? It's time for the swimming test, also known as dunking. Tied up and dropped in a pond, you're left to float or sink. If you float, it's because the pure waters of God reject you, and you're a witch. If you sink, congratulations, you're innocent. But don't get too smug. The test is only considered a success if you survive long enough to celebrate, which is not a guarantee in Salem's chilly spring. If you're lucky, you might face a less creative ordeal. Recite the Lord's Prayer without a single mistake. Stumble on a word, perhaps because you're terrified, exhausted, or freezing, and it's more evidence you're in league with the Kleislizier purse, devil. Even the most pious can trip up when the whole village is watching with a hangman's rope nearby. Of course, none of these tests have any real scientific backing. They're desperate attempts to make chaos feel logical, to control fear with rituals disguised as proof. For the accused, it's a nightmare. Every trial is a lose-lose scenario. Every test stacked against you. Every moment one slip away from disaster. And the townsfolk? Most aren't looking for justice. They're looking for reassurance that the evil isn't lurking inside their own homes. So how do you pass the test? Simple. You don't. The real test is surviving the process with your sanity intact. Because in Salem, innocence is beside the point. What matters is being lucky enough to escape the wheel of suspicion before it turns your way. In Salem, 1692, church isn't just the center of town life, It's the entire playlist on repeat. Every event, dispute, and accusation comes with a heavy soundtrack of sermons, psalms, and stern warnings about the devil's Wi-Fi signal being extra strong this season. Religion isn't just part of the witch trials. It's the driving beat, the backup vocals, and the lead guitarist all rolled into one. Start with the sermons. They're long, loud, and leave very little room for spiritual ambiguity. The ministers thunder about sin, temptation, and Satan's agents on earth. The devil is less an abstract concept and more a neighbor who borrows your tools and never gives them back. Puritan theology is obsessed with the idea that evil is always lurking, always ready to strike. And everyone, yes, everyone, should be on the lookout. God is strict. The devil is sneaky. And your best protection is constant vigilance and possibly never having fun again. But religion isn't working alone. Old grudges and new opportunities for payback are working overtime in the background. Revenge and religion are the original power couple. And together, they make the witch trials go from simmer to full boil. Did someone snub you at the last church supper? Did the neighbor get the better harvest? Or did your cousin lose the last pew in the meeting house lottery? There's a Bible verse for that. And a rumor, too. Ministers aren't just passive bystanders. Some are leading the charge, egging on the courts, stoking the flames, and helping set the agenda for who is next in the line of suspicion. Reverend Samuel Parris, for one, is front and center, convinced that dark forces are out to get his household, and by extension, the whole village. He preaches about invisible enemies, spreading panic and offering himself as the town's spiritual security system. It's not just about faith, it's about control. Religion becomes a tool for keeping the anxious masses in line, justifying harsh measures, and making sure nobody asks too many questions. The line between sincere belief and political maneuvering gets blurrier with every new accusation. Want to settle a score? Find a convenient Bible passage. Want to rally the crowd? Remind them of the devil's greatest hits, temptation, pride, a touch of envy. The sermons practically write themselves. Sometimes, the revenge is so petty you can't help but marvel. A slighted business deal, an old argument about property lines, a stolen chicken. Suddenly all take on spiritual significance. That's not just a neighbor dispute, says the preacher. That's evidence of Satan at work. No wonder every town meeting feels like the world's weirdest mixtape. Fire and brimstone warnings, whispered grudges, and the occasional shout of witch thrown in for dramatic effect. And all the while, the afflicted girls sing their own terrifying chorus, naming names and flinging accusations like confetti at a particularly gloomy parade. The community is swept up in a religious frenzy, with everyone eager to spot signs of evil, recite the right prayers, and, if necessary, outdo the neighbor in righteous indignation. When the dust settles, it's impossible to tell where honest faith ends and personal vendetta begins. But one thing's clear. Salem's witch trials are fueled by equal parts holy terror and garden, variety spite. So next time you hear a catchy tune stuck in your head, just be grateful it isn't the sound of your neighbors testifying against you to the devil's greatest hits. Not everyone in Salem ends up in the courtroom, but nobody escapes the trials. For every person accused, there are dozens more watching from the edges. Friends, neighbors, even total strangers drawn in from surrounding towns. Life on the sidelines is a masterclass in survival, equal parts anxious crowd watching and duck and cover. You're not in the dock, but you're definitely in the blast radius. First, let's talk about the spectators. The trials become the social event of the year, if not the decade. People turn out for the spectacle. Families, farmers, itinerant peddlers, and that one guy who never seems to work but always finds the best seat. The meeting house is packed to the rafters. The windows are crowded with faces, and even the local dogs seem to sense something big is happening, mostly because there are so many crumbs on the ground. You come for the drama and stay for the suspense. Will today's suspect cry? Will the afflicted girls faint in unison? Will the judges catch someone trying to smuggle a pie into the jail? Even if you don't know the accused, you're invested. Each new accusation is another episode in a grimly compelling series, and missing a day is unthinkable. You discuss the latest developments over dinner, argue about which neighbor is acting odd, and try to remember if you ever borrowed a cup of salt from Goody Putnam. But being a spectator doesn't mean you're safe. Every day, the circle of suspicion grows wider. You keep your head down, nod politely to everyone, and try not to draw attention. You rehearse answers in your head, just in case you get called as a witness. No, I have never seen Goody Nurse fly. Yes, my bread always rises on its own. No, I do not own a black cat, only a moderately surly chicken. You watch your words, avoid eye contact, and make sure your chores are always done. In Salem, visible laziness is basically a confession. There are survivors too, people who were accused, jailed, and then, against the odds, released when the panic subsides or their accusers lose interest. Returning home is bittersweet. Your reputation is singed. Your property may be gone, and your friends treat you like a bad luck charm. Some survivors leave Salem entirely, eager to disappear into less suspicious territory. Others stay, quietly rebuilding their lives and their gardens, grateful for second chances and much less interested in local gossip. If you're neither accused nor a survivor, you're probably somewhere in between. A friend who tried to defend someone, risky. A relative who kept quiet, smart. Or a neighbor who brought food to the jail, heroic but not always appreciated. Everyone is affected. Trust evaporates like dew in the morning Sunday. Friends betray friends. Families splinter. Even the town's animals seem more nervous. The aftershocks last for years. The memory of who testified, who cheered, and who stayed silent lingers long after the gallows are taken down. Salem's new pastime is pretending nothing ever happened. People look the other way, plant new crops, and hope time will erase the worst of their own decisions. So if you find yourself on the sidelines of history, remember, sometimes surviving means staying quiet, avoiding the front row, and never, ever borrowing sugar from your neighbor again. Every panic has its breaking point, and for Salem, it arrives when even the most die-hard accusers start to realize there are simply too many witches for comfort. The numbers don't add up. The jails are overflowing. The gallows are getting more use than the town well. And it feels like half the village is either accused, accusing, or avoiding eye contact in the marketplace. When your neighbor's milk won't churn, you're starting to wonder if it's just bad luck after all. At first, everyone's caught up in the excitement. Each new accusation seems to confirm what the ministers have been preaching for years. Evil is everywhere, and vigilance is the only defense. If you're not suspicious, you're not paying attention. There's a feverish sense of purpose to the proceedings. Something big is happening, and you'd better be on the right side of history, or at least not standing too close to the wrong person. But after a few months, the excitement sours. The list of the accused grows long and strange. Respected townsfolk, pillars of the church, and even the governor's wife find themselves named as witches. Suddenly, the witch hunt feels a little too close to home. You start glancing over your shoulder. When your own cousin gets arrested, you start to do the math. If this many people are witches, maybe nobody is. Jails fill to bursting. so packed that prisoners sleep standing or take turns on the straw, and every meal is a struggle for enough to go around. The gallows are busy, too busy. Even the hangman starts to look uncomfortable. You can hear it in the nervous laughter at the well, the sideways glances at church, the new reluctance to gossip too loudly in case someone is listening. The judges begin to hesitate. Spectral evidence, which once seemed like an airtight case, is starting to look suspiciously like just dreams and nightmares. He pinched me in my sleep suddenly feels a lot less convincing when half the people in town have supposedly turned up in someone's nightmare. Ministers who once stoked the fire now quietly distance themselves. Even the afflicted girls seem less enthusiastic. Maybe it's fatigue, maybe it's guilt, or maybe they're just running out of believable fainting fits. The trials drag on, but the energy in the room has shifted from righteous fury to exhausted anxiety. Some brave souls speak out. A few clergy and townsfolk begin to question the madness. Wasn't it strange how every feud or land dispute ended in a witchcraft accusation? Isn't it odd that nobody can produce a single piece of physical evidence? No enchanted toads, no broomsticks, no receipts from the devil's shop. A judge here, a minister there, a neighbor who has seen enough. The tide begins to turn. Slow as spring thaw, a merchant in Boston writes a letter of protest. A former accuser hesitates before giving testimony. Her voice quieter now. Regret sets in, quietly at first, like a chill draft under the door. Those who accuse their neighbors replay their testimony in their heads at night. You might see someone in the market and remember the look on their face as you pointed your finger in court. Friends and family, now separated by prison walls, send desperate letters and prayers. The bravest attempt to recant, but it's not easy to reverse a wave of panic once it's in motion. Once the wheel is spinning, it takes a lot to slow it down. The authorities, eager to save face, begin to downplay the confessions, question the afflicted, and quietly hope everyone just moves on. In the streets, a new hush falls over the village. People walk quickly, eyes lowered. Conversations are careful. If you've survived this long without being accused, you're suddenly more interested in forgiveness than judgment. The worst fear now isn't witches. It's the fear that you might be next on the list of people who got it wrong. You wonder if anyone will ever trust each other again. Apologies are whispered, reparations quietly suggested, but no one really knows how to put a town back together after so much suspicion and betrayal. The spell, so easily cast, is not so easily broken. Even after the courts close and the accused begin to trickle home, thin, sick, and forever changed, the fear lingers. Some villagers leave Salem for good, hoping for a fresh start elsewhere. Others remain, learning to live with the knowledge that everyone's hands are a little dirty. It will take years, decades even, for Salem to admit what happened and to say, in public, that it was all a mistake. In 1706, Ann Putnam Jr., one of the original accusers, stands up in church and apologizes for her role in the hysteria. It's a start, but it's not enough. Most choose the easier path: quiet forgetfulness, historical shrugs, and awkward silences at the annual harvest festival, but the memory never really goes away. Children grow up hearing whispered warnings about the witch times. Families pass down stories of lost relatives and broken friendships. The records are copied and sent to Boston, where people read them with horror, relief, or a touch of superiority, secure in the belief that it could never happen to them. So when the math finally stops adding up, what's left is regret. Heavy, awkward, and impossible to ignore. It's a lesson in the dangers of certainty, and a reminder that sometimes the scariest thing isn't the devil, it's the neighbor you never thought to doubt. In the end, Salem learns that it's much easier to break trust than to rebuild it, and that no one, no matter how pious or rational, is truly immune to panic. When the smoke finally clears in Salem, what's left isn't triumph or closure, but a long, awkward silence. The trials have ended, the gallows stand empty, and the hysteria has drained away, leaving behind a town full of people wondering how things went so wrong, so fast. No one throws a parade. There's no victory feast. Just a lot of neighbours bumping into each other at the well and pretending not to remember who accused whom of speaking to cats or turning milk sour. The authorities, once so eager to punish witches, now scramble to save face. The governor steps in, quietly dissolving the court of Oyer and Termina, and declaring that spectral evidence is no longer enough to send anyone to the gallows. It's an overdue realization, and it comes a little late for the 20 people who were executed, and the dozens more who wasted away in jail. The governor also pardons the remaining accused, some so weak from their ordeal they can barely stand. A few trickle home, clutching the shreds of their old lives, finding their homes ransacked and their reputations in tatters. The apologies begin, but in classic Salem fashion, they're equal parts regret and strategic silence. Ministers issue lengthy statements about the work of the devil and the great sorrow that has befallen the village. Judges pen carefully worded letters, expressing deep remorse while gently sidestepping any mention of their own eager sentencing habits. The Massachusetts General Court, eager to put the whole thing in the rearview mirror, decrees a day of humiliation and fasting, which, let's be honest, just sounds like more Salem. After all, nothing says we're sorry like a public event where everyone sits around feeling bad and hungry. If you're a family member of the executed, your only consolation is a handful of coins, reparations, the colonial way. It's meant to patch up lost inheritances, ruined reputations, and empty chairs at the dinner table. But silver coins don't warm cold beds or erase bitter memories. The survivors, some of them released from jail only to discover their homes taken or burned, accept what they can and try to rebuild. A few leave Salem entirely, seeking fresh starts where their last name doesn't come with whispers attached. Life goes on, but nothing is quite the same. The children who watched their parents hauled away grow up a little faster. The afflicted girls, once the village's accidental celebrities, fade into the background. Some offer apologies, others simply move on, settling into quiet marriages or new towns. A few are forever haunted by their role in the madness, while others become cautionary tales told in neighboring villages. Don't end up like the Salem girls. The rest of the townspeople become experts at the historical shrug. Things got a little out of hand, didn't they? They'll say over the garden fence, before changing the subject to crops or weather or anything but last year's panic. The new normal is a delicate truce. Everyone remembers, but no one wants to be the first to bring it up. Trust, once broken, is hard to stitch together, especially when your new patchwork quilt includes neighbors you once tried to send to jail. Meanwhile, the reputation of Salem grows beyond its borders. News of the trials and their aftermath spreads through New England, then across the Atlantic. Scholars, skeptics, and traveling ministers arrive to poke through the ashes and interview the survivors. Was it mass hysteria, moldy bread, bad theology? Or was it just the dangerous mix of fear, boredom, and the kind of neighborly pettiness that can fester in a small town? No one is sure, but everyone has an opinion. The story takes on a life of its own, morphing into legend, cautionary tale, and, eventually, Halloween goldmine. For generations, the witch trials become the thing Salem is known for. The fields still need tending, babies still need minding, and the meeting house benches are still hard as ever. But beneath every harvest and every hymn lingers the shadow of 1692. Old men mutter about the time of the trouble. Mothers hush children's questions. Some families change their names, move away, or spend a lifetime insisting we had nothing to do with it. But the stain is hard to scrub out. Time, as it turns out, is both cruel and kind. It blurs the sharpest pains but also dulls the lessons. Salem slowly grows back into itself. Fields turning green and children laughing again, though always a little more quietly. The memory of the trials is passed down in family stories, church sermons, and eventually in history books. Every so often, a new panic or scandal elsewhere will prompt the warning, "Remember Salem." So, next time you think about the aftermath of history's disasters, remember Salem. A place where the best apology anyone could muster was, "We're very, very sorry," and a handful of coins. The real cost of panic is trust, broken, fragile, and hard to rebuild. But maybe, if we're lucky, the lesson sticks. Maybe we learn to spot the signs, the rumors, the fear, the sudden certainty that someone must be to blame. Or maybe, like the people of Salem, we just change the subject and hope for better weather. You survived the accusations, the fits, the courtrooms, and the neighbor-on-neighbor finger-pointing. Now you're left with the big question. How did any of this actually happen? Was it really witches? Or was it something much weirder? A full-blown episode of mass hysteria, Salem style. Let's start with the basics. 1692 is a rough year in a rough place. Salem is cold, hungry, and perpetually nervous. There's war on the frontier, disease in the village, and a winter so long you start to forget what sunlight feels like. Anxiety is the real local specialty. Pile on a heavy helping of religious dread, sprinkle in a dash of old grudges, and mix thoroughly with boredom and bad bread, and you have the perfect recipe for a community meltdown. Modern historians have spent centuries diagnosing what went wrong. One theory? Ergot poisoning, moldy rye bread laced with hallucinogenic compounds. Maybe all those visions, twitching fits, and nightmares were just a case of eating the world's worst toast. Imagine your daily bread is less staff of life and more gateway to involuntary interpretive dance. Ergot is a fungus, and it loves a cold, wet New England harvest. If it gets into your rye, you're in for a wild ride. Convulsions, hallucinations, even a bit of communal breakdancing on the meeting house floor. But ergot isn't the only suspect. Psychology gets its moment in the pillory, too. Picture being a teenage girl in a rigid, joy-averse society, with everyone watching your every move. You're stuck in an endless loop of chores, sermons, and more chores. If you sneeze the wrong way, someone thinks you're possessed. If you laugh, it's scandal. Maybe you want a little attention, maybe you just want to break free. The fits, the fainting, the accusations, they might be your only ticket out of invisibility. And once the adults start believing, the show must go on. Then there's the groupthink. In a town where conformity is survival, the urge to fit in is overwhelming. One person sees a spectre, and soon everyone's seeing them. If you don't, you risk looking suspicious or even complicit. The hysteria is contagious, spreading faster than the flu. Each new accusation lowers the bar for the next. Suddenly, logic is on vacation, and every shadow looks like trouble. The effect snowballs. If your neighbor is acting out, you start to wonder if you're missing something, or if you should join in. Children see the attention their peers are getting, and jump on the bandwagon. Adults, desperate for explanations, start connecting dots that don't exist. And if the village's biggest personalities, ministers, magistrates, town elders, give the panic their blessing, everyone else follows. In a world with no science class and no internet fact-checking, what people say becomes what people believe. Don't underestimate the power of social pressure. Adults want answers for their misfortunes. Children want to be believed. Ministers want to save souls, and neighbors want to settle scores. The more people invest in the witch hunt, the harder it is to admit they're wrong, even when the evidence is thin as a Puritan's smile. Nobody wants to be the first to say, "Actually, I think this is all a bit much." If your entire social network is built on not rocking the boat, you'll bail water even as the ship sinks. And what about fear? It's everywhere. Fear of the unknown, fear of failure, fear of hell, fear of each other. Fear has a way of short-circuiting common sense. It turns a few nervous fits into a full-blown epidemic of suspicion. It makes people see patterns in the random, meaning in the meaningless, and evil in the ordinary. Fear works fast. One scream, one accusation, and suddenly you can't tell the difference between coincidence and conspiracy. Add in the ever-present hunger and exhaustion of daily colonial life, where a bad harvest means real danger, and every sickness carries the threat of tragedy, and it's no wonder people are looking for explanations, even if they have to invent them. If your baby falls ill or your crops fail, it's comforting to think there's a reason. And if the reason is my neighbor is a witch, well, that's a problem you can at least do something about. And then there's boredom. Never, ever underestimate what a bored village can do. Give people too much time and not enough distraction, and they'll invent problems, and sometimes entire conspiracies. In Salem, boredom is the flint that sparks the blaze. The witch trials offer excitement, purpose, even a twisted kind of fun, until the consequences come home. It's the ultimate group project. Everyone gets to participate, whether you want to or not. Don't forget the old grudges either. Centuries-old property disputes, simmering resentments, and decades of minor insults all bubble up to the surface when there's a chance to settle the score under the cover of moral outrage. Who hasn't wanted to blame their problems on someone else? In Salem, you just needed the right excuse and a bad week. By the time it's over, nobody can quite remember how it started. All that's left is the uncomfortable knowledge that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, for better or worse, when fear, groupthink, and a lack of snacks collide. So how did this even happen? The answer is as messy as a Salem winter. A mix of real hardship, imagined threats, psychological quirks, and the unstoppable human urge to explain the inexplicable. In the end, maybe the biggest magic trick in Salem was turning everyday anxieties into something world-famous, and teaching the world, for generations to come, just how dangerous a bored, frightened, and hungry village can be. Salem's witchy past lives on, now with gift shops, haunted tours, and way better fashion. What was once a tragedy is now a lesson, a warning, and, let's be honest, an opportunity for a really good Halloween costume. If you walk through Salem today, you'll find yourself surrounded by reminders of 1692, but with a distinctly modern twist. The streets are lined with shops selling spell books, usually blank inside, tarot cards, crystal pendants, and every shape and shade of pointy hat you can imagine. There are entire stores dedicated to witchy chic, and if you want to buy a broom that will never touch a speck of dirt, this is your place. Gallows Hill is no longer a symbol of terror. Now it's the starting point for ghost tours and selfie opportunities. Every October, the population of Salem explodes like a cauldron that's been left unattended. Haunted Happenings Festival brings in a colourful wave of tourists, fortune-tellers, and actors, all eager to embrace the spirit of the season. The town transforms into one big masquerade. Cobblestone streets echo with the click of high-heeled witch boots, and the distant giggles of people taking photos with authentic colonial stocks. The same houses that once trembled with fear now glow with purple lights and animatronic black cats, all perfectly Instagrammable. But Salem's transformation isn't just about spectacle. The story of the witch trials has become a powerful teaching tool, a warning about what happens when fear, prejudice, and rumor rule a community. School groups tour the old jail and the Witch Museum, where actors deliver stern warnings about groupthink and scapegoating. Local guides retell the old stories, some sticking to the facts, others adding a little creative license for dramatic effect. Even if you came for the haunted hayride, you'll probably leave with at least one new fact about colonial paranoia. Pop culture can't get enough of Salem's story. From Hocus Pocus to The Crucible to dozens of other TV shows, movies, and novels, the town's reputation has been remixed, rebooted, and glamorized. Witches in stories today are more likely to be wise, misunderstood, and stylish. Heroes, not villains. And honestly, the fashion has improved so much that even a Puritan would be tempted to trade their scratchy wool for a black velvet cloak and some sparkly rings. There's a sort of poetic justice in the way Salem has reclaimed its narrative. Modern-day witches, Wiccans, pagans, and spiritual seekers now make pilgrimages to the city, drawn by its history and the freedom to celebrate what was once punishable by death. Festivals, rituals, and open circles are held in the parks, blending remembrance with resilience. For many, the town has become a place of healing, where old wounds are acknowledged and new communities can flourish, pointy hats and all. Of course, there's still a little absurdity. For every thoughtful memorial, there's a rubber witch mask on sale and a haunted house staffed by teenagers who scream for minimum wage. The commodification of tragedy can be awkward, yet Salem has managed to balance fun and reflection, turning the weight of its past into something a little lighter, a reason to gather, remember, and maybe learn not to repeat the same mistakes. And in the end, it all comes back to the power of a good story. Salem's witches never really had magic, but their legend has bewitched the world for over 30 years. Their tale is retold every autumn, every classroom unit, and every time someone tries on a cloak and pretends to fly. The lesson still stands. Be careful who you blame, and never underestimate the human capacity for both cruelty and reinvention. So as you wander through Salem's present, with a souvenir broom in one hand and a pumpkin-spiced latte in the other, remember that the real spell is in the storytelling, and it's one the town and the world are still under. Move over, village blacksmith. There's a new job in town, and it pays in drama, not skills. In the midst of hysteria, a handful of locals achieve minor celebrity status by becoming the official accusers, witnesses, or, if they're feeling fancy, witch finders. Suddenly, being able to feint convincingly or name-drop demons is a ticket to relevance. If you ever wanted fame for being a little too dramatic, Salem was the place, and 1692 was your year. In a community where the most exciting job used to be chief fence mender, it doesn't take much to rocket up the social ladder. Suddenly, it's not the people who plant the best beans or own the most sheep who get attention. It's the ones who can collapse on cue in the courtroom or recite the latest rumor with just the right amount of gasping. The afflicted girls, particularly, are now the A-list influencers of their day. When Ann Putnam Jr. or Mercy Lewis walks into a room, people hush just in case a good accusation is about to drop. Being an accuser has perks. The usual rules about quiet and obedience are suspended. Now, the louder you shriek and the more convincingly you roll your eyes back in your head, the more the judges believe you. There's prestige in being the first to identify a spectral attack and points for creative storytelling. If you can produce a detailed account of someone's midnight devil dance, even if you were allegedly asleep at the time, you get extra respect. Your words are scribbled down by the court like gold, and grown men stop in the street to ask you for updates on the supernatural scene. Of course, not all celebrities are teenage girls. Witchfinders, self-declared experts in all things occult, begin to pop up. These are the folks who swagger into court with pins, looking for the infamous witch marks, translation, any mole, wart, or mosquito bite unlucky enough to be visible at the wrong time. The Witchfinder's toolkit is nothing special. A sharp pin, a few memorized prayers, and a willingness to poke the accused until someone yelps. The more witches they discover, the more important they become. Nobody asks where they got their training, but everyone listens when they declare, "Aha, another one." For some, the celebrity goes to their heads. The afflicted girls, previously background noise in the daily grind, are suddenly courted for their opinions. Their fits become more elaborate. Stories of flying cows, ghostly hands, and nighttime visitors get wilder. They get gifts, sometimes even sweetmeats, or little tokens of gratitude from anxious villagers desperate to stay on their good side. If you want to survive, best keep them laughing, and keep your black cat out of sight. Meanwhile, ambitious adults join the fun. A well-timed accusation might settle an old land dispute or get revenge on a rival. The chance to testify, to be seen and heard, tempts even the shyest townsfolk in a world starved for novelty. Being able to point and gasp at the right moment is a quick route to notoriety, and the occasional extra loaf of bread at market. But fame is fickle. Today's celebrated accuser is tomorrow's suspicious outcast. As soon as the hysteria begins to cool, people start remembering who screamed the loudest, who fainted at whose name, and who spent just a little too much time poking people with pins. A few accusers will later express regret or try to fade quietly into the background, but for a little while, they're the most watched, whispered about, and feared people in town. So, if you ever worry about missing your shot at stardom, remember Salem. In 1692, the only skill you needed was a flair for the dramatic, and, if you could, the blank prode ability to avoid your own 15 minutes lasting a lifetime. Turns out, you're not the only one on trial, your pets are, too. If your cat stares too long at the minister, or your pig grunts suspiciously at a witness, congratulations, they might be named as co-conspirators. In Salem, everything from a weirdly friendly goat to a particularly judgmental chicken can be accused of witches' work. Animal control? More like animal panic. It's not as if pets have an easy life to begin with in colonial Massachusetts. Dogs are mostly guard animals, cats exist to keep the mouse population in check, and pigs do what pigs do best: eat everything that's not nailed down and occasionally escape to annoy the neighbors. Most animals are valuable property, but in 1692, they're suddenly liabilities. A misplaced bark or a chicken's side-eye could land you both in trouble. Let's start with the most notorious accomplice, the black cat. If your household has one, you're already living dangerously. Legend has it that witches can transform into black cats or use them as familiars, supernatural helpers on four legs. The fact that your cat is just exceptionally good at catching mice does nothing to help your case. If it hisses at someone, evil omen. If it purrs in your lap while you're being questioned, proof that you're in league with dark forces. And if it coughs up a hairball in court, you might as well start saying your goodbyes. Dogs don't get a free pass either. In several documented cases, dogs are actually executed for witchcraft. One poor mutt is accused of being bewitched simply for barking at the wrong time. Another is declared guilty after confessing under pressure, meaning he barked when someone mentioned the devil. Salem's standards of evidence are so low, Even the neighborhood dogs are at risk of capital punishment. Pigs? If you think pigs are safe, you haven't met Salem's creative accusers. The town's most unlucky pigs find themselves blamed for everything from crop failure to neighborly disputes. One tale tells of a pig who, allegedly, spoke in a human voice and revealed the name of a witch. No word on whether the pig asked for a lawyer. If your swine seem too clever for their own good, best keep them out of sight until the panic passes. It doesn't end with pets. Livestock of all stripes, horses, goats, cows, are scrutinized for odd behavior. Does your goat follow you around like a loyal dog? Clearly she's enchanted. Did your cow give sour milk? That's not bad feed or old age, it's witch's milk. Even chickens get pulled into the madness. If one lays an egg with a funny shape or seems to crow at the wrong hour, someone is sure to suggest it's a sign from the devil. The afflicted girls take this animal anxiety to new heights. During trials, they shriek about invisible birds, phantom dogs, or yellow creatures only they can see. They claim these animals bite, scratch, or speak in unholy tongues. All delivered with enough drama to get the judges scribbling frantically in their notebooks. Trying to defend your furry or feathered friend only makes you look guiltier. If you cry when your dog is led away or feed your pig extra apples for comfort, you're painted as unnaturally attached. If you act indifferent, you're heartless, a classic witch trait, according to the local expert in accusation science. It's a no-win scenario for both pets and pet lovers. In the end, the animal panic is just another reflection of human fear, projected onto whatever happens to be nearby. If you survive the trials, your animals do too, and life eventually returns to normal. Cats chase mice, dogs bark at shadows, and pigs get fat on someone else's turnips. Until the next panic, at least. So next time you give your cat a suspicious scratch or laugh at your goat's antics, remember Salem. Here, even a pig can be both your best friend and your legal counsel. Think medieval jail was bad? Welcome to Puritan prison, where the food is mostly theoretical. Your cellmate might be your neighbor, and the only thing more common than fleas are rumors. The jails overflow with suspects, each awaiting a trial date and subsisting on what friends can smuggle in, if you're lucky. If not, you get to ponder eternity while sharing a blanket with 3 strangers and a mouse named Regret. First things first. Forget about those cozy scenes from modern movies. There's no kindly warden, no library, no time to work on your memoirs. Salem's jail is a drafty wooden building, reeking of mildew, chamber pots, and stale bread. Your bed is a pile of straw, flattened by so many people before you that it's basically compost in waiting. If you're fortunate, you get the corner furthest from the door, where the wind only bites your feet instead of your whole body. Meals are inconsistent, and nutrition is an optimistic term. The jailer's job isn't to feed you, it's to keep you in, unless you have money. In that case, you can bribe him for an extra cup of broth or a slightly fresher crust. Most days, you make do with watery gruel, stale heel of bread, and water that's somewhere between questionable and is that moving? Some families send food, smuggled in under coats or baked into a lumpy pie. If you're unlucky and have no friends left, you learn the fine art of rationing or making conversation with the local rodents. And oh, the company you keep. Salem's jail is the great social mixer. Rich and poor, young and old, church elders and the very people they once scolded for singing off-key. You're thrown in with accused witches, debtors, even the town drunk, who can't remember what he did to end up here but is certain it was someone else's fault. Privacy is a joke. Secrets are impossible. You know everyone's business by the end of your first night, whether you want to or not. What really thrives in this environment isn't justice, it's rumor. Every cough, every creak, every visit from the magistrates sends a new wave of speculation through the cells. Was that scream the sound of someone being questioned? Or just someone who saw a spider? Did Goody Putnam really confess to flying at midnight? Or was she just dreaming? The line between real news and fevered imagination blurs, and nobody sleeps well. Days blur together in a timeless limbo. You lose track of time. Was it 2 weeks or 2 months? You mark the passing of days by the footsteps in the corridor, the arrival of food, or the changing smell of your cell. Some prisoners pray, some cry, some retreat into silence. A few are optimists, offering stories and small comforts. Others sink into despair. If you're lucky, someone slips you a bit of soap or a comb, gifts more precious than gold in the land of dirt and whispers. If you're a child, it's even worse. Children are often jailed with their parents, or tossed in with the general population, forced to grow up quickly while learning to dodge lice and despair in equal measure. Some sing hymns to pass the time. Others invent games using bits of straw and imagination. Nobody gets out the same as they went in. Sometimes, escape stories circulate, rumors of a loose floorboard, a distracted jailer, a daring midnight dash. Mostly, though, you stay put, waiting for the court to call your name and praying you're forgotten rather than remembered. When or if you finally walk free, freedom feels different. You're thinner, weaker, marked by the stares of neighbors who now see you as tainted goods. But at least you're alive. You survived Salem's version of jailhouse rock. More like a slow grind, but the kind you'll never dance to again. Not everyone stuck around to test the limits of Salem's hospitality. Some accused witches hightailed it out of town, disguised as traveling salesmen, lost sheep, or, in at least one legendary case, just a very determined woman running through the woods. Sometimes, all it took to dodge the noose was quick thinking, faster running, and a complete disregard for Puritan fashion rules. It wasn't easy. Salem isn't exactly Paris, and blending in required some serious creativity. You couldn't just slip on sunglasses and a trench coat. The best you could do was borrow someone else's bonnet, keep your head down, and pray no one recognized your shoes. The real masters of escape were the ones who understood that in a small town, the only thing faster than gossip was a well-planned getaway. Some escapes happened in the dead of night, when the whole village was asleep and the moon was your only witness. You'd pack a few crusts of bread, grab your best walking stick, and vanish into the woods, hoping you remembered enough about moss and north stars to find your way to a safer town. The forests around Salem were wild and full of strange sounds, but compared to a courtroom packed with angry neighbors, the howls of coyotes were practically a lullaby. Others escaped with a little help from friends or sympathetic relatives. Maybe a neighbor left their barn door open, accidentally looked the other way, or stashed you in a hayloft while the magistrates were busy interrogating your cousin. Networks of resistance, quiet, cautious, and fueled by desperation, sprang up in the shadow of the panic. Sometimes, all it took was a horse, a borrowed cloak, and the willingness to trust someone who still remembered the difference between justice and a grudge. Some took the gamble of heading for Boston, New York, or Rhode Island, where the local authorities were less interested in mass hysteria and more concerned with their own problems. If you could find work as a servant, laborer, or even a second-string cobbler, you might just vanish into the crowd. Word of the Salem madness traveled fast, but not as fast as a determined runaway on a cold, clear night. Of course, not every escape involved slipping away unseen. A few clever souls played the long game, pleading, illness, collapsing at just the right moment, or faking a fit of their own so convincingly that the magistrates decided they were more trouble than they were worth. There are stories of accused witches who simply outlasted their accusers, keeping quiet in jail until the panic died down. then emerging as quietly as possible once cooler heads prevailed. A handful managed to bribe their way out, trading what little valuables they had: silver buttons, heirloom spoons, promises of favors once the dust settled, for a blind eye from a sympathetic guard. The line between justice and commerce in the Salem jails was, let's say, flexible. For those who stayed gone, the future was uncertain. Maybe you started over with a new name in a distant village, blending in and keeping your stories to yourself. Maybe you sent secret word home, promising to return when it's safe. A few never came back at all. Their fate just another mystery for Salem's rumor mill to chew over for years. The escape artists of Salem remind us that even in the tightest corners, there's room for courage, luck, and a little creative rule-breaking. While most of the town was paralyzed by fear, these determined few risked everything for a chance at a different ending, a fresh start somewhere that didn't ask quite so many questions about your herbal tea recipes or your slightly suspicious cat. So the next time you're cornered by a bad situation, remember, sometimes the smartest move is the one that gets you safely out the door. No matter what you're wearing. After the frenzy faded and the dust settled, Salem was left with a mess. Empty homes, broken families, and the ghost of mass paranoia. Neighbors avoided each other, judges got nervous, and everyone spent a lot of time pretending they definitely hadn't accused anyone of summoning Satan over burnt biscuits. The true reckoning was quieter than the trials. Just a slow, awkward attempt to stitch a community back together. One uneasy prayer at a time. The fields that once buzzed with gossip now grew silent. Weeds curling around abandoned doorsteps. Some houses never filled again. Some families slipped away to other towns, unable to stomach the sight of old friends who testified against them, or empty chairs at the dinner table that would never be filled. Salem shrank in on itself, as if it hoped to hide from its own reflection. Everyone was suddenly an expert at avoiding eye contact at the market. The village leaders tried their best to act like everything was fine, issuing proclamations of unity and, occasionally, calling for a public day of fasting and humiliation. These events had all the fun of a staff meeting after a failed project. Everyone together in the same room, nodding, while silently calculating how long before they could escape. The governor wrote formal letters, and the ministers prayed for forgiveness. But the real work of mending things fell on the villagers themselves, who had to learn to trust, or at least tolerate, the people who had once stood against them in court. If you were lucky enough to survive the accusations and walk free from jail, the homecoming was bittersweet. Your garden might be overgrown, your belongings missing, and your good name permanently on sale at the rumor mill. You returned to a community where every smile seemed forced. Every conversation paused a little too long. Some welcomed the freed with awkward meals or a loaf of bread left quietly on the doorstep. Others crossed the street to avoid them, whispering as soon as backs were turned. Children sensed the change, too. The games they'd played, imitating the afflicted girls, mimicking the shrieks and falls, became taboo. A guilty reminder of the drama that had cost so many lives and friendships. Parents were quick to hush any talk of witches, steering conversation to the weather or the next harvest.